If you're ambitious but lazy, watch this samurai lesson. The Kaizen method to success. Jake Morrison had a vision board. It was spectacular, 6 feet wide, covered in magazine cutouts of luxury cars, exotic destinations, fit bodies, and screenshots of 7-figure bank accounts. He'd spent 3 hours creating it, finding the perfect images, arranging them just so. That was 6 months ago. He hadn't looked at it since at 28. Jake was drowning in the gap between who he wanted to be and who he actually was. His apartment was littered with half-read self-help books, an expensive gym membership card he hadn't used in 4 months, a dusty guitar he'd sworn he'd learned to play, and a business plan for a startup that existed only in his head. He had ambition in abundance. What he lacked was the ability to do anything about it. "I'm just lazy," he told his roommate Chris one evening, sprawled on the couch scrolling through his phone while simultaneously feeling guilty about scrolling through his phone. "You're not lazy," Chris said. "You're just waiting for motivation to strike like lightning so you can suddenly transform into the person on your vision board. Meanwhile, you do nothing because anything less than a massive transformation feels pointless." The words stung because they were true. That night, unable to sleep, Jake found himself watching a documentary about samurai culture. One segment caught his attention, a master swordsmith explaining how a legendary blade was created. "We did not forge this sword in one heroic effort," the old man said through a translator. "We folded the steel 1,000 times. Each fold, by itself, meaningless. But 1,000 meaningless folds created a blade that could cut through anything." The concept seemed absurd to Jake. 1,000 folds, why not just make a good sword in fewer folds? But something about it nagged at him. The next morning, he searched samurai productivity and discovered a concept called Kaizen, continuous improvement through small, incremental changes. One article stopped him cold. The samurai understood that transformation is not an event, it is a process of such small steps that each individual step appears insignificant. The lazy person dreams of transformation. The wise person takes the next small step. Jake felt personally attacked and intrigued at the email on impulse. Jake wrote to the documentary's production company, asking if they could connect him with someone who could teach him about Kaizen. To his surprise, he received a response 3 days later from someone named Kenji Tanaka, a martial arts instructor in Oregon who studied classical samurai philosophy. "Your email interests me. Most people want dramatic transformation. You admit you are ambitious, but lazy. This honesty is rare and valuable. Come to my dojo for 1 month. I will teach you what the samurai knew about turning grand ambitions into daily actions. But I warn you, this method is boring. If you seek excitement and motivation, look elsewhere. If you seek results, come 2 weeks later." Jake stood in a sparse dojo facing a man in his 60s whose calm presence somehow felt more intimidating than if he'd been aggressive. "You want to be successful," Kenji said. "Not a question." "Yes." "Define success." Jake launched into his vision: financial freedom, excellent health, mastery of multiple skills, meaningful relationships, adventure, impact. "Stop," Kenji interrupted. "This is not a definition. This is a fantasy. Fantasy is what lazy people have instead of progress." Jake bristled. "I'm not lazy. I'm just—" "You are lazy," Kenji said calmly, "but not in the way you think. You are not lazy in your capacity for action. You are lazy in your willingness to start with small actions. You want the result without the 10,000 steps. This is a specific kind of laziness. The laziness of wanting to skip the process." He gestured for Jake to sit. The samurai had a concept: continuous improvement. It means getting 1% better each day. Not 10%, not 50%, 1%. This sounds easy, which is why lazy people ignore it. It also sounds insignificant, which is why ambitious people ignore it. But it is the only method that works. The paradox of ambitious laziness. "Let me show you your problem," Kenji said, pulling out a piece of paper. "You are ambitious." "Yes." "You want to achieve great things?" Jake nodded. "And you believe you are lazy?" "Yes." "You start projects and don't finish them. You have ideas you don't execute. You know what you should do, but don't do it." "Exactly." These two things, ambition and laziness, seem contradictory, but they are not. They are two sides of the same dysfunction. Kenji drew a diagram. Your ambition creates a vision of your ideal self. Successful, disciplined, accomplished. This vision is so grand, so far from your current self, that the gap feels impossible to cross. So your brain, which is lazy by design, refuses to start. Why take a tiny step when you need to cross a canyon? He drew a small stick figure at the bottom of a cliff and a successful figure at the top. The lazy, ambitious person looks at this cliff and says, "I need a helicopter to get to the top. Until I have a helicopter, I will wait here." And they wait, and scroll, and plan, and research helicopters. But they never start climbing because climbing feels too small for their grand ambition. The samurai looked at the same cliff and said, "I will take 1 step up, then another, then another. I do not need to see the top. I need to see the next foothold." Jake felt exposed. This was exactly what he did. His goals were so big that any single action felt inadequate, so he took no action at all. "Kaizen," Kenji continued, "is the antidote to ambitious laziness. It says, make the step so small that laziness cannot refuse it. Make the step so small that it seems ridiculous. Then take it anyway. The Samurai Method, Principles of Kaizen over the following days. Kenji taught Jake the principles that samurai applied to master their arts. Principle 1. 1% improvement. The samurai did not try to master the sword in a day, a month, or even a year, Kenji explained. They practiced for decades. Each day, they aimed to be 1% better than yesterday. Not 10%, 1%. He demonstrated a basic sword strike. Today, I do this strike 100 times, trying to make each one slightly more precise than before. Tomorrow, I do it 100 times again, building on today's precision. In 1 year, I am not 1% better. I am 37 times better. Jake looked skeptical. Kenji pulled out a calculator. 1% improvement daily, compounded over 365 days. The formula is 1.01 to the power of 365. He showed Jake the result, 37.78. In 1 year of 1% daily improvement, you are nearly 38 times better than when you started. But here is what stops lazy people. The improvement from day 1 to day 2 is barely visible. Your ego wants dramatic progress. Kaizen requires you to trust the invisible process. The first teaching, your laziness comes from wanting dramatic visible progress. Kaizen requires trust in invisible incremental progress. 1% daily compounds into transformation. But only if you start. Principle 2. Make it so small you cannot fail. What is your biggest goal? Kenji asked. I want to get in great shape, Jake said. Lose 30 pounds, build muscle, have visible abs. Good. How many push-ups can you do right now? Jake dropped to the floor. He managed 8 before his form collapsed. Excellent. Starting tomorrow, you will do 1 push-up every morning. 1, that's nothing. I can do 8. You can do 8 on a good day, when you feel motivated, Kenji corrected. Can you do 1 on a bad day? On a tired day? On a sick day? On a busy day? On a day when you got 3 hours of sleep? Well, yeah, 1 push-up is. Then you will do 1. Only 1? Every single day. No matter what, this is your practice. Jake felt frustrated. But 1 push-up won't get me in shape. Correct. 1 push-up will not get you in shape. But 1 push-up every day without exception will build the only thing that gets anyone in shape. The identity of a person who shows up, and once you have that identity, adding more push-ups is easy, Kenji explained. The samurai made their practice so small that conditions could never prevent it. Rain, exhaustion, injury, war, they still practiced. Not for hours, sometimes just for moments. But without exception, the samurai saying, fall down 7 times, stand up 8. The standing up is easy when you did not fall far. The second teaching, your ambitious goals require a foundation of consistency. You cannot be consistent with grand gestures. You can be consistent with actions so small they seem almost insulting to your ambition. Do them anyway. Principle 3. Never miss twice, you will fail. Kenji said, this is certain. You will miss days, sleep through alarms, get sick, travel, lose motivation. The question is not whether you will fail. The question is, what happens after you fail? He told Jake about the samurai principle of immediate recovery, Nanatabi, Korande Yoki, fall 7 times, rise 8 times. If you miss 1 day, you are human. If you miss 2 days in a row, you are creating a new pattern, the pattern of quitting. The samurai had a rule, never miss twice. 1 failure is an exception. 2 failures is the beginning of a new habit. So if I miss my 1 push-up, the next day becomes sacred. That day, you do not negotiate. You do not make excuses. You do the 1 push-up even if you have to do it at 11:59 p.m. before bed, because that second day determines whether your miss was a temporary break or a permanent quit. The third teaching, you will miss days. This is guaranteed. The battle is won or lost, not on the day you miss, but on the day after. Never miss twice. 1 miss is an exception. 2 misses is a new one that leads away from your ambition. Principle 4. Measure process, not results. Show me your phone, Kenji said. Jake handed it over. Kenji scrolled through the apps. Fitness trackers measuring weight lost, meditation apps counting consecutive days, productivity apps tracking hours worked. You measure results, Kenji observed. Weight, profit, output. The samurai measured process. Swings taken, forms practiced, days shown up. He handed the phone back. When you measure results, you are at the mercy of factors outside your control. You can eat perfectly and not lose weight for 2 weeks due to water retention, so you get discouraged and quit. But if you measure process 8 according to my plan every day, this week you can always succeed, because process is in your control. The samurai did not measure whether they won the duel. They measured whether they practiced. The wins came, but only as a byproduct of process consistency. The fourth teaching, results lie in the outer circle of control, influenced but not guaranteed. Process lies in the inner circle, completely within your power. Measure what you control. The results will follow, but only if you stop obsessing over them. Principle 5. Identity before outcome. You say you want to lose weight. Kenji said, this is an outcome. The samurai focused on identity. They did not say, I want to win duels. They said, I am a swordsman. The actions followed identity, not the other way around. He had Jake write down his goals, then cross them out and rewrite them as identities. I want to lose 30 pounds, gives. I am someone who takes care of my body. I want to be successful, gives. I am someone who solves problems and creates value. I want to learn guitar, gives. I am a musician who practices daily, see the difference. Outcomes are destinations. Identities are directions. A destination can be achieved and then abandoned. A direction guides every small decision, Kenji explained. When you identify as a musician, practicing 10 minutes is not too little to matter. It is proof of your identity. The samurai did not train to become warriors. They trained because they were warriors. The identity came first. The outcomes followed. The fifth teaching, stop chasing outcomes. Start building identity. Every small action you take is a vote for the type of person you are becoming. One push-up is not just exercise. It is evidence that you are someone who shows up for yourself. The 30-day practice. Kenji gave Jake a simple 30-day challenge based on Samurai Kaizen principles. Week 1. Establishment: 1 push-up every morning, no matter what. 2 minutes of meditation using a timer. No shortcuts. Write 1 sentence in a journal. Anything counts. This is insultingly small. Jake protested. Good. That means your laziness has no argument against it, and your ambition has no excuse for skipping it. Week 2. Consistency: same as week 1. But now track it visually. Create a calendar. Mark an X for each day completed the goal. Don't break the chain. Week 3. Incremental growth: add 1 push-up now, 2 total. Add 1 minute of meditation now, 3 total. Add 1 sentence to journal now, 2 total. Still insultingly small. Kenji said, this is intentional. We are building the foundation, not the building. The samurai spent years on foundations. Week 4. Identity integration: continue the practices. But now, notice, you are someone who shows up. This is not what you do. This is who you are becoming. The breaking point in day 12. Jake woke up with a terrible cold. His head pounded. His body ached. He'd barely slept. The last thing he wanted to do was anything. He texted Kenji, too sick to practice today. The response came immediately. 1 push, 2 minutes sitting. 1 sentence. Conditions do not determine practice. Practice determines identity. Jake wanted to argue, but he remembered, never miss twice. If he missed today, tomorrow would determine everything. He did the worst push-up of his life, barely lowering himself, arms shaking. He sat for 2 minutes feeling miserable. He wrote, sick, showed up anyway. This is who I am now. Something shifted. He had just proven to himself that he could show up in the worst conditions, not for a grand achievement, but for the simple act of keeping his word to himself. This was the samurai way. Practice regardless of conditions, because the practice is not about the conditions. It's about the practitioner. The first insights around day 20. Jake noticed something unexpected. The 1 push-up had become 2, then 3, then 5, not because he had to, but because he was already down there and it felt wrong to stop at 1. The 2 minutes of meditation had stretched to 5. Then 10, not from discipline, but from genuine curiosity about the practice. The journal entry had expanded from 1 sentence to several paragraphs. The habit of showing up had made the practice itself intrinsically rewarding. This is the secret, Kenji explained when Jake mentioned it. When you remove the pressure of grand achievement and simply focus on showing up, the practice becomes enjoyable. And when the practice is enjoyable, it grows naturally. The samurai did not force themselves to train for hours. They started with minutes. But because they showed up every day without exception, the minutes became hours organically. Kaizen is not about forcing yourself. It is about starting so small that force is unnecessary. The compound effect at day 30, Kenji had Jake reflect, 30 days ago. You were ambitious but paralyzed by the size of your ambition. Where are you now? Jake reviewed his journal. He'd done push-ups every single day. He was now doing 20. His meditation practice was 15 minutes. His journal entries were detailed daily reflections. And beyond the specific practices, something deeper had changed. I feel different, Jake admitted. Not dramatically different, but I trust myself now. When I say I'll do something, I believe it. That's new. This is the greatest gift of Kaizen, Kenji said. Not the external achievements, but the internal transformation. You are becoming someone who can be trusted by others, yes, but more importantly, by yourself. The samurai called this GI integrity. It is the foundation of all other virtues. He pulled out a chart showing Jake's compound growth. Day 1. 1 push-up, 2 minutes meditation, 1 sentence day, 30 minutes and 20 seconds push-ups, 15 minutes meditation, detailed entries. This is 1 month. Imagine 1 year. Imagine 5 years. The grand ambitions you had, they are achievable, but only through this path. Small steps, daily consistency, compound growth. There is no other way that works. The 7 practices of ambitious Kaizen. Before Jake left the dojo, Kenji gave him a scroll containing 7 practices for maintaining Kaizen. Momentum. Practice 1. The 2-minute rule. A new habit takes less than 2 minutes. Do it now. This defeats laziness by removing its primary weapon, deferral. Want to be a reader? Read 1 page now. Want to meditate? Sit for 1 breath now. The samurai knew, the hardest part is starting. Make starting effortless. Practice 2. The never miss twice principle. Track your consistency. When you miss a day, you will make the next day sacred. Do the practice no matter what. This prevents one exception from becoming a new pattern of quitting. Practice 3. The 1% rule. Each week, ask, can I improve this practice by 1%? One more push-up, 1 more minute, 1 more sentence. Not 10%, 1%. Trust compound growth. Practice 4. The identity vote. With every small action, ask, what type of person does this action represent? Then recognize, I am becoming that type of person. One action at a time. You are voting for your identity. Practice 5. The process scorecard. Track what you control. Did I show up? Not what you don't. Did I lose weight? This keeps you focused on the inner circle of actual control. Samurai measured swings taken, not duels won. Practice 6. The minimum viable practice. To find the smallest version of your practice that still counts. 1 push-up, 1 sentence, 1 minute. On bad days, do the minimum. This maintains the chain even in terrible conditions. Practice 7. The Kaizen review. Weekly. What worked? What didn't? How can I improve the system by 1%? Monthly. Am I becoming who I want to be? What needs adjustment? The samurai constantly refine their practice. Kaizen applies to Kaizen itself. 6 months later, Jake stood in his apartment, looking at the vision board he'd forgotten about. 6 months ago, it had represented impossible dreams that paralyzed him with their magnitude. Now it represented something different, a direction confirmed by 6 months of daily practice. He'd lost 18 pounds, not from dramatic diet and exercise plans, but from showing up for 1 push-up that became a daily workout routine, from 1 healthy meal that became a way of eating, from small, boring, unsexy consistency. He'd started the business from his business plan, not by quitting his job and taking a massive risk, but by working on it for 20 minutes every morning before work. 20 minutes, every single day, for 6 months, had produced a functioning prototype and 3 beta customers. He'd learned to play guitar, not by practicing for hours when he felt motivated, but by picking up the guitar for 10 minutes every evening without exception. The compound effect of 180 days of 10-minute practice had given him a repertoire of 15 songs. Most importantly, something internal had fundamentally shifted. He was no longer ambitious but lazy. He was someone who showed up, someone who kept commitments to himself, someone who trusted the process because he'd seen it work. The email to Kenji. Jake wrote to his teacher, Master Kenji. 6 months ago, I was drowning in the gap between my ambitions and my actions. You taught me something that seems too simple to work, yet it's the only thing that has ever worked for me. Start so small that failure is impossible, then show up every day without exception. I realize now that my laziness was not a character flaw. It was my brain's reasonable response to unreasonable expectations. When you dream of running a marathon but haven't run in years, your brain says no to going for a run, but it cannot say no to putting on running shoes. It cannot say no to walking to the end of the driveway. The samurai wisdom of Kaizen gave me permission to start absurdly small, and that permission was the key that unlocked everything. I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm someone who moves toward where I want to be every single day, in small incremental steps, and I've learned that's the same thing as success, just stretched over time instead of compressed into fantasy. Thank you for teaching me that transformation is not an event. It is a process of such small steps that each individual step appears insignificant. The lazy person dreams of transformation. The wise person takes the next small step. I am taking the next small step every day with deep gratitude. Jake, the teaching continues. Jake started a blog documenting his Kaizen journey. To his surprise, it resonated. Hundreds, then thousands of people reached out. I'm ambitious but lazy too. How do I start? His answer was always the same. Pick one thing. Make it so small it seems ridiculous. Then do it every day for 30 days without exception. That's it. That's the entire method. People protested. But 1 push-up won't get me in shape. You're right, Jake would reply. 1 push-up will not get you in shape. But becoming someone who shows up for themselves every single day, that person inevitably gets in shape. The push-up is not the goal. It's the vote for your identity. But I want to write a novel, and 1 sentence a day will take forever. Yes, it will take approximately 1 year to write a 365-sentence first draft. How many years have you spent wanting to write a novel while writing 0 sentences? The samurai spent decades mastering the sword. They were patient with process and ruthless with consistency. One person wrote, "This seems too simple. What's the catch?" Jake smiled, remembering asking Kenji the same thing. "The catch," he wrote back, "is that simple and easy are not the same thing. This method is simple, anyone can understand it. But it's not easy, because it requires you to show up on days when you don't feel like it, when you're tired, when you're sick, when you're busy, when no one is watching, when the progress is invisible. The catch is that our culture has trained you to believe transformation requires drama, intensity, and motivation. This method requires none of those things. It requires only consistency, and consistency is simultaneously the simplest and hardest thing in the world. The samurai knew, the warrior who trains every Day in calm preparation defeats the warrior who trains intensely only when motivated. Consistency beats intensity. Every time the paradox resolved one evening, reflecting on his journey, Jake finally understood the paradox that had defined him for so long. He'd thought ambition and laziness were contradictory. They weren't. They were perfectly compatible, and that compatibility was exactly the problem. Ambition, without a system for taking small, consistent action, is just fantasy. It's actually a form of laziness. The laziness of wanting results without process, transformation without practice, the destination without the journey. True ambition, the kind that actually achieves things, looks boring from the outside. It's showing up every day to do unremarkable things remarkably consistently. It's 1% improvements that are invisible to observers but compound into transformation over time. The samurai had understood this centuries ago. They didn't train for dramatic demonstrations. They trained for incremental mastery. Each day, 1% better. Each year, exponentially more capable. The formula was absurdly simple. Start so small you cannot fail. Show up every single day without exception. Never miss twice. Trust compound growth measure process. Not results. Build identity through repeated action. Review and refine the system itself. That was it. That was the entire method. Not sexy, not exciting, not motivating in the way self-help culture promised. But it worked. It was the only thing that worked. The next steps. Jake looked at his journal. Now 6 months of daily entries. Not one missed day. He looked at his body, 18 pounds lighter, visibly more muscular. He looked at his business, small but growing. 3 customers becoming 5, becoming 10. He thought about the vision board, still on his wall, no longer taunting him with impossible dreams, but guiding him with achievable direction. The samurai had known, you don't need a grand gesture. You need the next small step, taken with complete commitment, then repeated tomorrow, then repeated the day after, then repeated until the small steps have carried you to heights your grand gestures never could. Jake opened his laptop and began typing. Tomorrow's practice list. 25 push-ups, up from 24. 16 minutes meditation, up from 15. Journal entry, 25 minutes on business, up from 24. 12 minutes guitar practice, up from 11. Each item represented a 1% improvement from the week before. Each item was small enough that laziness had no argument against it. Each item, done consistently, would compound into transformation. He'd gone from ambitious but paralyzed to ambitious and progressing, not through motivation or willpower or dramatic change, through Kaizen, through the samurai. Understanding that mastery is not an event, but a process. That transformation is not a lightning strike, but 1,000 tiny folds of the steel. That the person who can take one small step every day without exception will eventually outperform the person who occasionally takes giant leaps. The ambitious, lazy person dreams of being different. The ambitious Kaizen practitioner becomes different, one small action at a time, compounded over days and months and years until the person in the mirror is unrecognizable from the person who started. Jake had been ambitious but lazy. Now he was ambitious and consistent. And consistency, he had learned, was the only ambition that mattered. The samurai had known this for centuries. He was just beginning to understand, and understanding, he was learning, was not an event. It was a process. One small realization at a time. One small step forward, every single day, without exception. Forever. That was the way, the only way that worked. The samurai way.